have some objectives here that you can go over with the therapist. I'll read you the 3 of them and you can pick which 2 you like the best, okay? I will identify 2 ways how killing myself will affect my family and friends. I will name 2 things that make me feel like hurting myself, or I will identify 2 people I can talk to when I have thoughts of hurting myself.
The first 2.
So you're here today because...
A night ago, I swallowed too many pain pills.
Okay. In an attempt to overdose?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel like you have anybody you can talk to when you feel upset?
I don't want to burden anyone with that.
Just know that you have a good support system around you, okay? And we're here to help you feel better. And is this the first time you've been Baker acted before?
Yes.
The halls of Gracepoint Wellness in Tampa are full of young people in crisis. In Florida, anyone threatening to harm themselves or others can be involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility for 72 hours, under a law called the Baker Act.
Are you wearing a bra?
Invoking the Baker Act has become so common that it's now a verb. It applies to all ages, but more and more, the people getting Baker acted are kids. Between 2011 and 2016, the number of minors committed under the Act rose by nearly 50%. At least 10 kids come through Gracepoint stores each day.
Once the child arrives, there are a lot of calls to the parent. The nurse calls the parent to say, your child has arrived, they're under a Baker Act, this is what we know, this is what the process is, do you have any information we need to know right away, things like that.
The majority of children who come to Gracepoint are here because they've expressed suicidal thoughts. Diagnoses range from depression and anxiety to mood and psychotic disorders. Here, they're evaluated by a psychiatrist who prescribes medication as well as group therapy and one-on-one counselling.
Do you worry a lot about things? What do you worry about?
I worry about school. I worry about work. I worry about at home, if everything's okay.
We're going to evaluate about medication. How do you feel about that?
I just don't want to feel like this anymore.
Every state in America allows some kind of involuntary commitment. But long-term mental health care is unattainable for most people because it costs too much or just isn't available. Instead, kids in distress have to rely on emergency short-term stays, long enough to name their problems, but not long enough to solve them.
The Baker Act serves as a crisis intervention, but do you think that kids are able to get access to the mental health care that they need across the county and across the state at the moment?
No, there is a huge shortage of child psychiatrists. There is a huge shortage of therapists, and that's probably why we have so many Baker Acts.
The Baker Act has been on the books since 1971, but it became a major topic last year after the Parkland massacre. School counsellors had tried to Baker Act the shooter, Nicholas Cruz, 2 years earlier, but clinicians and law enforcement said he didn't meet the criteria.
After Parkland, a lot of people said that Nicholas Cruz could have been stopped had he been Baker acted. Do you think that's true?
Yeah. Baker Acts are intended to stop things like that. That's the point. It's a safety net for society when a child or an adult is acting in a way that puts themselves or others at risk of death. If we can keep a kid from killing themselves, then we made a difference. If we can keep that kid from shooting up the school, then I think we made a pretty big difference.
How you doing? All right, I got some medications for you when you come out.
Do you think that if there was more long-term healthcare, if there was more preventative forms, if therapists were available to kids, then the Baker Act would dramatically decrease?
Absolutely. I think we would have less kids coming in, and I think kids wouldn't have to stay as long, because if we have more solid follow-up for these kids, then they're going to do better.
Until that happens, families often have no choice but to use the law to unlock care.
Listen, I am here. I have done what I needed to do to keep myself safe for now, but I don't know what I can do in my control later. No,
so now you have to build yourself up and become strong.
And you got 72 hours to do it.
Exactly, that's not enough time.
Well, I don't know what to tell you because that's the time you are allotted.
We'll work on it when it comes. We don't have to figure it all out right now.
You know what we do, because we have 72 hours to, if we're gonna figure out a plan. You can't figure out a plan in 5 minutes of me getting out of here.
Have you thought of any plans? Have you come up with a solution?
Breathe. Yeah, it wasn't fun.
It's the fear of the unknown. Not knowing where you're gonna go, what you're gonna do next, what's gonna happen next.
You know, she doesn't have any answers to any questions. She doesn't know where her head's at. You know, it's like, okay, so what do we do?
Do you feel like Baker Act was the right thing for Haley?
Well, yeah, she's safe for 72 hours, but what do we do after 72 hours?
Is your insurance enough to cover the healthcare needs that...
Well, it'll cover most of this. I mean, we'll have some out of pocket, but you know, for a residential center, it probably will only cover 50%, and that's not cheap. That's like $3,000 a day. Where does that come from? Mortgage the house for private care? What?
An average stay at a long-term residential facility is 145 days, and that can cost more than $65,000, which most insurance plans don't cover. A single night at Gracepoint is $700, and patients can see their stays extended beyond the mandated 72 hours if they're still considered a risk. But there's no guarantee that insurance pays for any of it.
So the goal is to get back home?
Yeah.
Statistics show that many of the kids who do get discharged simply end up getting Baker Acted again.
Have a lot of you guys been in here more than once?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long have you been in here for?
I've been in here for almost a week now. This is my 6th day.
Chris Aman is a freshman in high school. This is his 2nd stay at Gracepoint.
And being around other people who have maybe experienced similar things, does that help, or does that...
Yeah, it usually helps because then you guys can relate and like talk about what you've been through and other ways to like deal with it. And some people have other ways that you never even thought of.
When Chris was 14, he was Baker Acted for the first time after trying to overdose on pills.
What I want you to do is to draw something. It could be either a person, a place, or like a situation that causes significant anger in your life.
What did you write in the group therapy session?
I put people cutting because I hate to see others with cuts on themselves.
Is that something you've experienced a lot of?
Yeah, and I've cut myself too. So.
Why is it that you cut yourself?
Whenever my inner emotions build up, I can't control them. So I resort to physical pain that I can control, which is cutting.
What was it that brought you here?
A suicide note that I wrote to a teacher.
So this is your 2nd attempt at suicide? What would have happened if you hadn't got Baker Acted?
I probably would have killed myself Friday night.
Since you've been here, what are some coping skills that you've developed to distract thoughts of self-harm, or if you feel in distress, what could you do for yourself, and then who you could reach out and talk to?
I just need a minute in my room alone to listen to music or to think about what has happened or occurred, and then I come and talk to you about it.
But the second part's important too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. As a parent, it was a tough couple days, a lot of tears when he wasn't looking. And it's good to see him smiling with a sense of purpose.
Bye. You're leaving? Bye. Oh, I'm sad now. I'm gonna miss you, Rainbow. Bye.
What happened when you heard that he was being Baker Acted?
Well, I think any parent would be totally devastated, heartbroken. it was good to have an option because, you know, you want him seen, you want him to have help, and this was the option.
Baker Acts are more common during the school year, and it's usually school staff who are the first to flag a troubled student. In Chris's case, his school guidance counsellor, Mr. Schindler, initiated his second Baker Act call and has helped monitor his progress since then.
What was behind your decision to Baker Act, Chris?
After speaking with his teacher and reading some things he wrote and talking to him, I believe that he was a suicidal risk.
Can you walk us through what happened that day?
The art teacher, she called me in and she pulled out a letter that he wrote to her about how upset he was. He talked specifically about hurting himself, about suicide. Called Chris in and he did explain to me that he was serious about it. At that point, we reached out to law enforcement to go ahead and start the Baker Act.
Most mental health emergencies end up getting handled by police officers dispatched by 911. Already this year, there have been more than 3,000 mental health calls to sheriff and police in Hillsborough County alone. More than 400 of those calls resulted in a juvenile Baker Act.
You don't know that you're gonna Baker Act somebody en route, because basically all you've got is either information from a caretaker, information from a concerned family member. It'll often come from school, and sometimes even friends. A friend will call and say that they just saw that one of their friends posted something on Facebook, or that they posted something on Twitter about them feeling down and them thinking about hurting themselves. And in that case, we'll respond right away.
Have you noticed any change in the rate of kids that are being Baker Acted?
Me personally, yeah, I do see a steady increase in juveniles.
10-4, the complainant says her son needs to be Baker Acted and is signal 20, being combative, not taking medication.
2651, thank you.
Has this guy been Baker Acted before?
It seems as though, yeah, it ran a history on the address, and it shows multiple Baker Acts in the past. She said, well, the doctor said he needs to be Baker Acted. I said, then his doctor, recognizing his history and being familiar with him, can do the Baker Act. However, us showing up based on what we see, it's not,
Of course, no doctor in his right mind is going to over the phone.
Oh, no.
Whether law enforcement should be the first responders to mental health calls has been up for debate nationwide. In Hillsborough County, the need is so great that the Sheriff's Office established a program offering deputies 40 hours of initial training on how to handle these kinds of calls.
Do you feel like law enforcement are the right people to be on the front line of this mental health care crisis?
Absolutely not. We shouldn't be a part of it. And we're not clinical professionals. We're not doctors. We can't diagnose and fix what's going on with that kid.
It must be an incredibly difficult situation to know how to handle in that moment. I mean, obviously it's a high-risk scenario, which is why you guys have been called out. But on top of that, I mean, these kids must be going through real trauma and a real moment of crisis in their lives.
Absolutely. It's terrifying. It's terrifying for the family and the child. You know, you have a law enforcement officer there with a gun and a taser, and they don't know what's going to happen.
Someone else just called in reference to the same 1020 saying a female took a bunch of pills and is currently foaming at the mouth, so EMS is going to be 51 too.
We've got a female, unknown how old, who has tried to hurt herself in the past. We just got a call from one of the parents stating that she had a knife and she was trying to cut herself. So probably big knife.
No answer to the door and it's locked up. Based on what we got, we're gonna end up doing it.
She's admitted to me that she took 4 Xanax and then she locked herself in a bathroom and started to attempt to cut herself. The statements that she made during my interaction with her was that if her family didn't care about her and if nobody else was gonna care about her, then why should she care about herself and what was gonna happen? And that she no longer wanted to live. So all that taken into consideration, that's more than sufficient to meet the criteria for the Baker Act. It's sad, you know, it's sad. I have kids. You get to situations and you get to calls where you You know, they either resemble your children or they're the same age. You know, you get there and you can't undo 16 or 17 years in 15 minutes.
911, what is your emergency?
Hi, I need an officer down here at a Kmart. I don't know the address.
Okay, what's going on there?
I tried to run away and I just need a cop to bring me home.
Hello? Hi, this is Dispatcher 66 with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. How are you? Yes. We received a call from your son. We're going out to meet with him at the show on Big Bend and Kings because he called us to ask for a ride home. Okay, I'm on my way. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
He was probably 10 miles from home. 6 o'clock, sunset almost.
4 days after we filmed Chris leaving Gracepoint, he was Baker-acted again for the third time.
It wasn't expected. You know, I was trying to decide what we were going to have for dinner and relax. And find yourself heading to meet a county sheriff's officer to discuss the mental state of your son. I arrived and he was sitting in the back of the sheriff's car. For his own safety, they handcuffed him so he wouldn't hurt himself. And it was hard. He was pale white, didn't want to look at me, didn't want to answer, didn't want to talk. He was pretty distraught.
In order to solve these equations by factoring, very good.
It's kind of hard to live and see the positive side of stuff. Like, I'll just go to school, put on a mask, pretend that I'm happy and I'm okay, just so people don't really ask me what's wrong, because it's kind of hard to answer that question when everything is wrong. So I pretend that I'm happy, tell people I'm okay, but inside I'm not.
What's it feel like inside?
It's pretty hard to even cope with everything.
Are you on meds?
Yeah. The lithium's helped, but the Prozac didn't really help at all. Like, there's always something deeper inside than just you take meds and you feel better. Like, even after that, there's gonna be difficulties.
Is it frustrating to you that they keep Baker-acting you for a few days and then you keep getting released and then you have to go back there again?
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating. Like, they're not realizing that it's not gonna help if it's 3 days or a week. I need longer to get help. Residential is usually better for people who have depression and who've been there more than 3 times and who've even said that they rather have residential. I just want to get help for the pain that I'm feeling inside. With depression, it's like putting a cast over a scar. It's only gonna hide it. Like, it's always gonna be there. Like, it's never gonna leave.
It sounds like, from what Chris is saying, what he needs and what he's desperately asking for is residential care. Why is it, do you think, that that's not happening?
I don't know that that's the best for him. The doctors didn't seem to think that that was what he needed. And Chris, I don't think fully, he's 16 years old. I don't think he understands that. It may go back to his, running away, running away from his problems. And he needs, the right support. We're gonna find it.
Knowledge is power, especially if you use it. So I want you to feel comfortable working with me, but above all, know what this is all about.
After being Baker-acted 3 times and identified as high risk, Chris qualified for Gracepoint's Community Action Team, a cost-free program where therapists and case managers make home visits and provide support for 6 to 9 months. The goal is to keep kids home and out of long-term residential facilities.
The most important part about the program, Chris, is that it will always revolve around you and your family. So let me ask you this. The father, is he involved now or no?
Not really.
We've been separated a very long time, since '06. Chris was just a baby.
Okay. So let me ask you this, though. So you have no friends?
Except for online friends.
All your friends are Like
Virtual.
invisible or virtual?
Virtual.
Okay. What are your expectations of this team? How do you think we can help you?
I don't really know. Probably like a good therapist and people who I could relate to.
The main goal is to keep you safe, okay?
Could we have an officer to pivot charter? We have an out-of-control student who they need assistance with. He was hitting objects, harming, attempting to harm himself and things like that.
And it's a child. Okay.
A month after returning to school, Chris was Baker-acted for a 4th time.
Chris came to us and he was really concerned about a friend that he felt was being harmed at home. He became really agitated that day, and during his agitation, he punched a wall. He had pepper spray on him, so that was a 10-day suspension. Unfortunately, that was the day that he got his 4th Baker Act. While he was on suspension, right before he was supposed to come back to school, he had posted some pictures on Snapchat. One was of a brown handgun sitting on a bed. And so kids were very concerned, showed it to their parents. Some kids responded to him and said, "Hey, are you going to bring this to school?" And his response was, "Only if I have to." We had 160 kids not come to school that day.
Around the same time that he posted the Snapchat, which he later said showed a fake gun, Chris snuck into a neighbor's house and stole a real one.
He had 6 different charges: attempted burglary of an occupied dwelling, grand theft, 3rd degree, attempted burglary of occupied structure, armed burglary of a dwelling, firearm, grand theft firearm, grand theft, 3rd degree, grand theft from a dwelling, minor possession of a firearm. My concern is he going to be the next school shooter? I have students in this building that it's my job to protect.
Chris was arrested, spent 21 days in juvenile detention, and later expelled from school.
You gave me 5.
Chris told us he never intended to harm anyone. He's now at home where he's enrolled in online classes and waiting for his next court hearing in June.
You're hopeful for results. That's what you're looking for. An improvement, a path that he can follow for his whole life.
I'm gonna go to my room for a little. No, I need to go to my room, just for a little. I just don't feel good.
Anybody who's a parent feels whatever pain their child feels. If your child's in pain, you are in pain.
Dear Jesus, please bless me, Mommy, Michelle, Chris, Danny, in the name of God,
It's the kind of pain I don't think any parent ever wants to go through, is seeing their child suffering and there's nothing you can do. And, all you can do is pray for a good resolution, good care, so that he can make it through that.